Hey, what's up? Doug Cunnington here from Niche Site Project. I talk about Amazon affiliate marketing, internet marketing in general, and project management. In this video, I talked to Nick, who tried the digital nomad lifestyle for a little while, and honestly, it didn't quite work out. There were some issues with, I guess, overall sort of budgeting, being able to, find freelance gigs and that sort of thing. So this is part of the Digital Nomad Location Independent series. Other interviews that I've published showcase some success, but the reality is not everyone is successful right away. It does take persistence. It does take laying the right foundation and groundwork. So I talked to Nick in this interview. We go over, how he struggled and what he would do differently and what he's doing now. Nick's a really cool guy. He showed up to a lot of different YouTube live streams that I was doing, and that's how we connected. He showed up when no one else was showing up. We've become, sort of online friends a little bit here. So let's get to the interview and hear from Nick right now. Hey, what's up? Doug Cunnington here from Niche Site Project. This is part of the interview series with Digital Nomads, and I'm sitting here with Nick today. Nick, how are you doing?
Good, Doug. Thanks for having me on.
So, interesting story. You and I haven't met before, but chatted a bunch on my YouTube live streams and on Facebook and stuff, and we finally connected. So it's really good to meet you. I don't know much about you. So it's kind of cool to have you on. We were just laughing before we started. We haven't talked to each other before, even though when did you start following Niche Site Project, by the way?
About June, I would say, I think is when I started my niche site and one of my niche sites, and then I started following you from that,
Cool.
learning more about niche sites and getting into it, and kind of just found you naturally through YouTube. So
right on. Very cool. Well, since I don't know anything about you, let's get started with the basics. Where are you located? What's your background? What's your day job? What's your deal?
Right. So right now I'm located in the Florida Keys. Actually, we just got hit with Hurricane Irma there. So went through that a little bit, and it was funny. I was saying that, jokingly, obviously, but instead of bringing down the first aid and stuff, could you guys bring down the internet so as us digital nomads could get back and hooked up to the internet? It's kind of you kind of realize man, you miss it if you don't have it. So but no, obviously, in all sincerity, everything's good down here. But aside from that, I started on this path to becoming a digital nomad in April of 2016. I was working with my father he owns a construction company, and it was really typical story, prototypical, working at a day job, knew it wasn't for me, not really into construction. It's not something that comes naturally to me. And I've always had this dream of traveling the world and becoming a digital nomad. And I think that a lot of people can relate with that story, sitting under a fluorescent light. And it's kind of funny now I actually probably spend more time in front of the computer than I did before. So it's not exactly the glitz and the glamour that you might think. And I'm still trying to make it. I'm in the process. But what happened was I left my job. I quit my job. I had a good amount of savings, a decent amount, what I thought would be a reasonable amount to travel to somewhere where I could do the US dollar, cost arbitrage, similar to when people move out to Chiang Mai or to the Philippines. I decided to go to Eastern Europe, which is another popular place. Some people that I know either live out in Kiev in Ukraine, or Belgrade, Serbia, or, Poland, maybe more of that Eastern European region rather than the Western European region, which tends to get a little more expensive. If it's the same cost of the U.S., then the city you're living in, you're going to need a full-time job to survive. If you're just starting out, maybe doing some freelance work, I'm sure that you can, relate to that type of thing, Doug.
For sure, yeah. And I kind of did it the wrong way, and I went to more expensive U.S. cities than the one that I was in. But it was fun, and I did have a full-time job at the time. So I want to back up just a tad. So did you go to university? Did you get a degree? What's your story on that angle? Okay. What's your background?
Right. So I'm 28 years old, and out of high school, I went to college, and I did marketing at first for a couple of years, and then I kind of was like, man, I feel like I could probably learn this on on my own, to be honest with you. Like I'm just being straight up. Like the stuff that we were learning, I didn't feel like there was anything that was like, like there's some studies and marketing studies and stuff like that, but it's not very like you need to be in a lab or something that's like really more suited toward a university, like a traditional
Right.
learning environment. And that's just my personal opinion, obviously. But so then I moved to economics, which I thought might be a little bit more, structured and have some formulas or something that I felt like I needed to be in a school to learn. And I did that. That was out of the University of Vermont.
Cool.
And yeah, so I ended that in 2011. From there, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I pretty much the thread to this story is that I knew I didn't want to go to just like a regular desk job, and maybe that's like avoiding putting in the work or whatnot. But I as a young kid, you get out of school and you're kind of like, all right, what do I do now? What do I do now? And I think that that's kind of, again, just my personal opinion, but I think that people are starting to come around to that idea, like, all right, you're still not prepared when you get out of college necessarily. At least I wasn't. Maybe some people are.
No,
Maybe some people are better suited for when they get out of college, but I certainly wasn't, and I still felt like I didn't really have any direction as to what I wanted to do. So left there, and then basically on and off just went and worked for my dad. I didn't really have any other options, and
Gotcha. And that was down in Florida?
Yeah, down in Florida, or options that I really tried to pursue, to be honest with you. I guess I took the easy way out, you might say. But again, when you have your family and they just paid for you to go through college, you kind of feel like some obligation at the very least to help out. At least I did. That's just my story.
Right. So. Yeah, and I think that's probably a common thing, especially your parents are probably like, yeah, it'll be great to have you like back home for a little while and stuff like that. So we'll fast forward, and you went to like Eastern Europe, you were checking it out, and you were doing like freelance gigs, or what were you doing? Are you just living off savings, or how did that work?
Yeah, so that was kind of the issue, and what I've learned from that experience is, yeah, when I left in April and I didn't really have a plan. I thought I had a plan, but looking back, I really didn't have a plan. And I think the problem is that I left like thinking like, oh, I'll just figure it out on the way, but I didn't have anything started before I left. I wasn't looking into things as much as I should have before I left, or like applying for freelance gigs before I left, and getting something that I knew I could fall back on. And I just, I went with a friend who had been running a website for over a year. He had much more experience than me, and he was kind of, and not to blame him or anything, but he was like, oh, you can always just find like freelance writing work or freelance video editing work or different things like that, and you'll be able to figure it out. And he actually pushed me to start my first niche website at the time, which was called Sip of Scotch. If you want to hear a bad niche site idea, here's one for you. It was structured around like reviewing and tasting scotches and giving information about scotch. And then the monetization method was I would sell the ice cube trays, the $10 ice cube tray. You would try to get people to link through to Amazon. So I had an idea of the affiliate, method, but it didn't go very far. It went like one or two articles. And or try to get people to buy like glasses on Amazon, but that's like a $20 item, and you're not really you're gonna have to have a lot of volume, and it would have taken, as I know now, a lot longer than I thought it was gonna take for me to make a living off of that.
Yeah, so, it sounds like a good excuse to drink scotch in the morning, though. So
right,
hard to come up with those reasons, but that's one. So interesting, and well, and by the way, everyone has like their first site that was just like really ill-informed, and you were just excited. I mean, I bought a domain name before I like even knew what I was doing. Bought like 10 domain names before I knew what I was doing. So yeah, that's totally natural. And how long were you in? Where did you go? Sorry, what country?
So my first stop was in Krakow, and then I went to Kiev, Ukraine. So Krakow, Poland, Kiev, Ukraine, Odessa, Ukraine, which is a little beach town resort area
Cool.
along the Black Sea there. And then I went to Belgrade, Serbia, and then I went back to Kiev. And then from there I that was the end of my trip. That was
Gotcha.
so. In total, it was about 6 months.
6 months. Nice. And I mean, like when you thinking back to like my corporate gig, like to be able to take a little sabbatical for like 6 months and travel to a whole new place, like totally worth it. Like 6 months is a good amount of time to like, decompress and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I didn't mention it in the intro, but we're kind of looking at this as like being a digital nomad when it didn't work out, right? Like Nick, I mean, you came back and like it's not like you lost or anything, you're just taking a pause and stuff like that. But like some people have it in their head they're going to be a digital nomad, it's going to work out perfectly, and they're just going to be able to do it indefinitely. But there's a lot of things that can come up. So, and let me ask you, like, just dealing with it and going through the process, like when you first got there, you probably had like really high hopes, and then like at some point you were like, you know what, I need to regroup, get some like things sort of organized before I head out again. So can you just tell me like your thought process and how you felt during that time period?
When I started, exactly like what you said, you're really excited, and I would get up every morning and I'm like, okay, apply on Upwork, and I was applying for jobs, and I was building out my own, nickbrisson.com, and I was making my own website and trying to display my work. But to go from, at least for me, to go from when you wake up in the morning and you have a regular day job, I don't want to say you're not thinking, but you're just like, you have everything planned out. You go there, someone gives you a task, most likely, you do that task, and then you leave and you go home. And to go from that to waking up and just having like absolutely no plan whatsoever, having like the ultimate freedom, especially when your entire life, I mean, in college, sure, I had fun, but you still have to do school, and and you're never totally free. And when I got there, after a couple of weeks, I'll be honest, like the freedom almost overwhelms you. It did for me. And I basically, I don't want to say went into a downward spiral, because it wasn't really a downward spiral, but it was just more of like a less and less work and more play, a freedom spiral, I guess.
Right.
Maybe it was an upward freedom spiral, but it essentially devolved into me not focusing on work and just seeing how long I could make my savings last.
Gotcha.
And so I think it takes a little bit of time and a lot of self-discipline, and I'm still struggling with that today. I mean, I'm doing much better now than I am because after a lot of time goes by and you're still working at this and chipping away, you're kind of like, all right, this enough's enough. I have to get this done. Like I gotta make something happen here, or else I can't just keep living like this for forever, not being able to produce an income for myself. And so, yeah, I think that if you're like me, then you really got to know yourself, and you got to be able to, and that's why I say start, or like have some sort of plan before. At least when I look back, I wish that I would have had something going, and having just the discipline to be able to get out of work and then work a couple hours on a side project will prepare you for what it will be like to be completely out of anyone's control and working on your own projects.
Yeah.
At least that's how it was for me. And so that's what looking back, that's what I think I might have changed or tried to work on more,
Yeah. And that makes total sense. I talked to a friend of mine. I'm not sure when this will be published and when her interview will be published, but Zoe Ariel, and she moved to Rome, probably a fairly expensive city to move to be a digital nomad. But she had a couple freelance like clients lined up before she left. Like not enough, right? Like she needed more, but she had a base set of like clients and spread the word a little bit, and they referred her, to other people that she could work with. So she was able to figure it out shortly after she got there. So it makes total sense. Of course, you don't know until you go, Nick, and then you're like, oh, well, it would have been good. So yeah. Interesting, very interesting. So a couple things like to dive in, because you were living the the lifestyle for 6 months. Like, was there anything aside from what you mentioned about like the ultimate freedom? Is there anything that was like kind of surprised you about that kind of lifestyle?
Surprising? I mean, at first when like simple things like getting a SIM card, and I don't know if this is the type of answer you're looking for, but like just going out and just handling little things like getting a SIM card or exchanging money, or all of that was really new to me. So it takes a couple of months to get acclimated and to realize like the size of the suitcase I brought was like ridiculously big. And looking back, I'd cut it in half, you know, because
Yeah.
I'd be going down the street or getting into the, you know, they have like really small taxis and they'd be trying to like shove this massive. So, and it's like, you know, typical American. I'm just going around, and so have like oversized bag, and it's just I wasn't very prepared. I wasn't seasoned as a traveler, and but by the end, I had it down. You know, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to this place next. All right.
Yeah.
I'd have the extra SIM card ready. Boom, I'd have extra money, and so at least for me, the surprising aspect was just like figuring out those little things that you're not really thinking about.
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised at like how many other people you can find traveling in other cities if you look for them. You know, a lot of people think if they go to a foreign country, and I don't know if they think this or not, but at least I did, that they're not going to find anyone or they're not going to meet anyone. But you can. There's a lot of other people out there traveling, and so because it can get lonely, or not necessarily lonely. I don't need to have a lot of social people around me, but I know other people who do. And when we would go to a town that would not have as much going on, like when I went with my friend to Odessa, it's kind of a beach town and it's kind of lazy, and he likes the hustle and bustle of a larger city. So he felt like you kind of got to know yourself, and through traveling, you'll definitely find out who you are. That's for sure. So
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Just I haven't been overseas in a few years. I've traveled to Europe a couple times and the Philippines once. But yeah, just thinking of like the little details, like you said, like, well, when I traveled, like you weren't getting SIM cards and stuff. Like it was it was a little before we were, I guess, like so inundated with like mobile phones and stuff. I don't even think you can get a SIM card like as easily back then. But anyway, the point is just thinking about the money and like logistics, like all the logistics and stuff. It's a little stressful. You have to like sort of reacclimate yourself. Even though I've been through it, like it stresses me out just hearing you talk about it a little bit. So I can appreciate that.
it's good. It's good though in a way though, because when you come out of it at the other side or after a month or two and you figure it out, you're essentially adding like skills to your tool belt, if you will. You know, like
For sure.
you're problem solving a lot of times. You know, you're negotiating with the locals for better rates outside of Airbnb, for instance. I did that a couple of times. You know, you're figuring out where things are. I had to mail something, you know, and all of those things I think can, in a larger sense, you know, be applied to other areas. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, for sure.
that's,
When you were like planning on doing this, were there any specific people that you like looked up to? You were trying to emulate what they were doing, or anything like that? Anyone you were looking up to?
no, no one in particular. I mean, there's a couple of travel forums I would say that I was a part of and learning from, and just kind of like getting a glimpse into what it was like. And again, I think it just goes back to like you get doing what you want to do. And I don't think that, you know, just quitting your job and moving abroad is going to fix problems that you have.
Yeah, yeah.
Not like, no, I don't have like, oh, I'm emotionally a wreck or something like that and I'm running from some problem, but it's not just going to be like, oh, you just leave your job and then everything's like great. No, there's still a lot of work to put in, and
Right.
and it takes a long time, and you really have to have a plan, and you're essentially starting up a business for yourself, you know, like you're working for yourself. And there's nothing about moving to another country other than it's going to be a little cheaper for you, that's going to make it easier on you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At least you can do the same thing living in the U.S. There's no advantage other than it makes it a little cheaper. So if you do have some savings and you're like, okay, I've been working on this little niche site, it's seeing a couple $100s a month. I think projecting out in 4 to 6 months, it's going to be a big deal. If I would just have the time that I could spend 100% on this niche site instead of a couple hours a night, and I also want to travel, yeah, I think that would be a great idea. And I think that might be a more proper way to set it up. I would approach it like that if I were to redo it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one thing that you sort of triggered a memory, like in college, between a couple terms, I worked in the Rocky Mountain National Park, and I actually had never been to Colorado. That's like sort of northwest of Denver. I never visited Colorado before at that time, and I was just like, I need a change of scenery. So like, I know being placed into another environment where you're like meeting all new people, you have different inputs. I knew that I liked the mountains, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go for 3 months between, these terms. And I worked out there. Of course, it's much easier because, you give you room and board. You're making, I don't know, like $5 an hour or something. But it's like everyone is living in one place. You got, the social scene and all that stuff. But yeah, you just triggered a memory unrelated to digital nomad. But if people just want like a change of scenery, they need to get out of their environment. Not that they're running away. I mean, you still have to deal with your problems or whatever, like you were saying, but like if you could land a job where like a lot of stuff is paid for and taken care of, that's a nice way to do it. And there were some people that literally they were like in some bad situation at home. They wanted to like go to another location, so they worked a resort job, which is an interesting take. Just I think it was a little bit before like this sort of niche site digital age and stuff like that. It was more like the vagabonding idea from like Rolf Potts. Have you read that book, by the way?
I have not, no.
Okay. I haven't read it either, but I've heard of it. So, so a little digression there, just me being self-indulgent and talking about myself. So we'll bring it back around. Nick, you said you are like getting some traction right now. So what are your projects? Like, what are you kind of working on?
Got a couple of things going on. I have several niche sites going, a couple that I've started from scratch, and a couple that I've been experimenting with the idea of like really sussing out some sites on Flippa, and I think I've seen a little bit of success with that. Like, I think you can find a couple of diamonds in the rough, and I wouldn't recommend this. I don't want to like, I know you've said you wouldn't recommend getting a built for you niche site, and I wouldn't either if that's your first site. I think you have to know what you're doing, and you really got to know what you're looking for, because there are a lot of scammers out there, and there's a lot of junk. Besides that, I've also been working on outreach. I've gotten a contract to do outreach for a marketing company, and cool. So I've had to recently hire a bunch of writers and basically take over their whole outreach program in the future. It's kind of in a development stage right now, but so those are the two main things that I'm working on. But yeah, so it's going well. But I think that building niche sites gives you so many different skills that you can apply to so many different things. With the KGR content, I recently helped someone out with showing them how to do that. With SEO in general, just learning white hat SEO, a lot of people are looking for that skill. I know there's a lot of people working on it, but there's also a lot of people who aren't doing it correctly. And if you really dive in, and I know you're smiling right now, but handling a team of writers when you're scaling up a niche site, and actually I have a couple of questions on that. But that's project management, man. I mean, that's like just learning how to manage a team of people and delegate and outsourcing. And all of those skills, I think, are really, really valuable. And I think you can apply them to a lot of different areas, And
so, I think, to the point of like the outreach, you're getting a contract or you're working on a contract right now. And like, I know there are other services that are like rolling out right now. And I mean, I had a guest posting service, an outreach service, which is kind of how I like refined my process, the one that's in like my course and stuff like that. And just when you hear me talk about it, like I learned it through getting like hundreds of guest posts and stuff over time. Turns out I didn't like doing it very much, and I didn't like working with clients either. So just like double whammy, was it going to work out for me? But easily could be a 6-figure business with a small team of probably like 2 or 3 people. I mean, like, you can really ramp it up. And if your clients, right, if your positioning is correct and you're not competing against like private blog network providers, you're working with, high-end clients, totally like enough money for 2 people to make 6 figures a year, I think. Not going to be easy, right? Like, eventually you'll start running into issues. If you're working with like bad clients, this is like unsolicited advice. I'm just self-indulgent again. Basically, clients, if you're working with the wrong clients, they're going to keep beating you up on price. They're going to try and like get volume discounts. Turns out you don't get more efficient when you're doing guest posting work. Outreach doesn't get easier. It actually gets harder the more that you do. So you're finding that, right?
Oh, absolutely. You're just dealing with a bigger and bigger spreadsheet that becomes more and more complicated to keep track of. It's not like the an area where scaling it up decreases time in any sense. It's you're just answering more emails and hiring more people. It's
right.
Not not getting any easier. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing because at first it's like, oh, I don't have to find more clients, but then once you start getting into the weeds, like it's like you can never end that contract because you haven't fulfilled, depending on how the contract's written up. So anyway, outreach is a big thing. I think people are probably going to be seeing like more and more services, and I think at the point where the marketers ruin the way that outreach is being done right now, probably like 12 or 18 months or so. I'm not 100% sure. It's going to shift. I hope I'm on the front end of like what's happening, and I'm doing things a little different. I'm doing things that take longer. You can't scale it, all that kind of stuff. But I see like a bunch of services starting up and then the effectiveness going down. So Nick, you should be on the front end of it too. So, all right. We're going to sort of shift this conversation a bit. Nick has some questions for me, so that'll give me time to hear my own voice and talk about myself more. So, Nick, what questions do you have?
Yeah, so on that, on the scaling aspect, I've always heard you talk about one of your main tenets is you preach simplicity. You know, not using any of these content builders, because if you have to train a VA or someone else to just post a post, man, those things are really difficult to deal with. But in that aspect, so is there anything? So I guess when you're scaling up, is there anything that you would any general tips or ideas on besides the outreach, but just is it as simple as just putting out more and more content? Because as I'm getting traction with my site, and I'm getting traction with some backlinks, and I'm getting more and more traffic, and I'm looking at larger sites, the only thing that I really see between my site and what they're doing is they're just producing more content, more and better content. And so I don't know if there's more to it than that, or do you see it like that, or just on, if you could kind of like just talk on that thread.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be great.
And we're assuming like niche sites in general, right? Some sort of an affiliate site.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. An Amazon affiliate site. And I guess I would say too is that not an Amazon, and I'm just taking this out of my head here, but like not like a niche site built on a really, like you always like to use, on a pen.
Right.
You know, something that has a little bit more depth. You're maybe trying to move it up towards an authority site.
Sure.
What has your experience been going from like that 20, 30 post range to moving it into like a couple hundred post range, and you're pumping out 5-10 pieces of content every week, and you're really scaling things up?
Gotcha.
Is it as simple as just hiring more people and producing more content?
Yeah. So some people watching, maybe like the first time they're hearing certain parts. So I'll set like a baseline.
Sure.
And the assumptions that I'm making, and then we'll talk about growing. So like if you're starting your first site, you probably want to launch with like 10 pieces of content, half being affiliate, half being just sort of like informational, not reviews, not trying to sell something. So that's in sharp contrast to other people who say, publish 50 posts, 150, whatever. So start small and grow. And Nick, I know you're talking about scaling up. So the way I kind of look at it, you have three sort of main areas to like do work. One is around just adding that content. So that's what you're talking about. Hiring more writers. Yeah, you could hire more writers to, make things go a little faster. Hire a content manager and editor to help you publish in sort of format and draft the stuff. I find like hiring someone that is good at that, they'll do it faster than I can do it, and it's just way easier for me. So those two things as far as content goes, as far as like adding just new post. So I think like after that, and this is something I haven't talked about as much just because I spend a lot of time trying to convince people about the keyword golden ratio and just publishing content. But once that stuff is published, I usually publish like 1,000 words per post or so just to get it out there. It's usually going to rank without any like backlinking or anything. So the portion that I'll spend time on is I'll get my writers. These have to be people that I've trained. Usually they've written, a dozen or more articles for me already. And then I'll give them a list of posts that are doing well. Maybe they're ranking number 2 to say number 10. And then I'll have them add like 2 to 4,000 words of content. Maybe they, add more products to the review. Maybe they just add more words to each one of the products that are already listed. Maybe they improve the buyer's guide or something like that. And in that way, you're going to, even if your rankings don't move, you're going to pull in more long tail traffic. Perfect case study where this really was amplified is Project Go White Hat. My business partner and I added I think there were 2,500 words. We beefed it up to about 7,000 or 8,000 and traffic went up by like 40%. We were already ranking number 1 for the term we were trying to rank for. So it was all long tail traffic through like better content. And people stayed on the page longer too. So, because they were just reading more information. So those are 2 things, like adding content and then improving content. Don't forget to improve and sort of just like take care of that. But the third aspect that I don't spend enough time on is the link building portion where if I recently spent about $6,000 on adding new content to a site, over 200 new posts over 2 months or so. And it was easy for me because I had the money, which is obviously a big hurdle, but I had the money to reinvest from the site making revenue. And then I already had a team in place. But when I took a step back, I was like, man, I should have spent like half or more, maybe 60% of that money on building an outreach team. Thing is, it would have taken me more time and I didn't have time then. But now I'm like, all right, I have plenty of content. I need links. So even though the keyword golden ratio can do really well, you're definitely going to get a good ROI on good links if you get, the right kind of backlinks and they're actually effective and all that stuff. So those 3 things: add more content, you can hire writers and all that, improve content, and then the third part is don't forget to add links. I talk so much about content, but links are super important. So long answer to your questions. That help?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important one, number 2 there, about looking internally at your site. And if you do have a post that's ranking 4 or 5 like that, like you probably would be better off spending that energy trying to bring it up to 1 or 2 rather than just throwing more 1,000-word posts at the wall and hoping something sticks. So yeah, that's it.
Right.
I think that's a great point. And also too, getting the best bang for your buck, going for those backlinks and doing, like you said, the outreach was probably the harder task in that list there. So that's probably what's going to get you the most return because it's the hardest thing to do. And those things that have that moat around them of being difficult usually provide the most benefit, that at least from what I've seen.
And then further, right? Like it takes longer for the backlinks to kick in sometimes. So like I was like, oh, I could add content and get a quicker impact than if I like build these backlinks. But unfortunately now, like right now when we're recording this, like it may be a little too late, even if I get like 10 backlinks or whatever in the next like 4 weeks. Like we're leading up to Black Friday and I maybe waited too long. There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so much I could do. I mean, I have a couple people that help me out, but I don't have like a full-time VA or any sort of like full-time staff. So yeah. So what other questions do you have?
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to imply that you didn't do the hard thing there, Doug.
No, I literally picked the easier thing to do. I mean, I'm just like everyone else. I was like, well, all right, I already have writers in place, but no, I need more people calling me out like that. My wife does. So, all right, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, and speaking of Project Go White Hat, I know you always reference that that project and that site. And I was listening to an old, I guess old if you want to call 6-8 months ago old, but one of your I don't know if it was an interview with someone or you were just you were talking about the site and you were talking about outreach. So getting back to outreach there specifically, and maybe I'm doing this as a little bit of a humble brag, but I think it's something that I would like to hear you more speak more on, and if it actually has worked for you. But reaching out to brands that you're reviewing. I know that I've looked at a lot of brands and a lot of e-commerce sites, and they're just that. They're e-commerce sites. They're not content creators. They're not in that type of business. They're in the business of selling a product. And yeah, sometimes that means creating content. I know we both like Gary Vee, and that's what he's real big on, is turning your company into a media company and putting out content around your product. But I see a lot of recently what I've been doing is reaching out to brands and noticing that their blog section of their e-commerce website is usually lacking. It hasn't been up to date. It's been stale for a month, or maybe they post one piece of content every month. It's like 600 words. It's not very well written. It doesn't have pictures. And I just simply approach them and say like, hey, I noticed your blog. I'm a real big fan. If I've written a review on their product, I'll say, hey, we mentioned your product here, and I've noticed that your blog section is lacking. Would you be interested in teaming up with any sort of, doing any sort of, we produce content for you in exchange for a backlink? And I've had a little bit of success. I've had a couple of brands say yes to that. And I want to know if you think that, A, those links mean anything. Have you ever done that? And have you ever seen any success with that? And do you see any sort of like interference with, you're getting a backlink from a brand and maybe that ruins your credibility or what?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably one of the best links you could get, because like it's from a company who probably has like brand backlinks themselves, right? So they're getting like links just from bloggers or whoever that are linking back to their main site. And I haven't done it myself. However, like I've had a couple sites where I got enough traffic and stuff that the brands like mentioned me, or not me specifically, but they mentioned the review. Maybe they added a backlink on their site and then, just pointed it out that they got some coverage. So for me, this is like super untapped, particularly for the sites where I have like so much content, so many products are listed, that it's probably a good idea if I just like get a researcher to find like all the product brands that are listed for like high traffic pages, and then like reach out to every one of them. Cause you could probably point out the amount of traffic that you're getting, say, hey, my readers really enjoyed your product. I mentioned it here. Just wanted to say what's up. And like, a lot of things, referencing Gary Vee, it's like, it probably will go farther if you don't come with your hand out. I'm not saying you are, Nick, but like, I can imagine some readers or viewers taking this and then they go and they're trying to negotiate a backlink with a brand instead of coming from a place of like, hey, we were promoting your product. Keep up the good work. We like what you're doing, which is how you should do it. And then like develop a relationship a little bit. But I think that is sort of like the leading edge, as I was talking about before, like the white hat outreach, white hat outreach in quotes that people are doing where they're sending out hundreds of emails. Like eventually that's going to like not going to be so effective. I mean, for Niche Site Project, I get like a few emails a day. I think someone's trying to get me to link to their site, which, either one is not relevant, or two, they're just like assholes about it. And they're like, hey, we'll give you a guest post of like really good content, but you have to give us a backlink. We expect a backlink. And I'm like, no. So anyway, I think that's great to approach brands. I think the backlink would be really effective. And it's something that like your competitors probably can't emulate as well if you're the first one there, right? If you are the first one to ask, like you're probably all right, because it'll get sort of saturated. And other people's sites, right, are going to be crappier, most likely. So
exactly. Yeah, and on that point, I guess I've always been drawn to your content because you always talk about like finding that gray space, similar with what Gary Vee says. He's always in the magic is always where everyone's not looking, right? You want to try and, or if you like to call it getting on the cutting edge there, or just like trying to find spaces that people aren't yet exploiting. And so in the outreach space, I think that a lot of people are using email, right? to reach people. Have you ever used, for instance, and again, I'll just say what I did, but for those brands, I went on Facebook and messaged them, and I found that they were a lot more responsive. Even if they said no, they at least, I think I did 6 brands, which isn't even that much, right? That's not a lot. Like I could probably, like you said, scrape your entire site and come up with a list of 100 products or 100 brands, right? But out of 6, I think maybe only 1 or 2 didn't reply. And then out of those 4, let's say, they at least said no thank you, or oh, that's a really nice post, but they didn't really get back to me about the guest posting. And then the couple that did, were one of them even said, wow, we're actually looking to pair up with bloggers to produce content for our site. So just right place, right time. But have you ever experimented with any other channels besides email to reach out to people? I mean, call me crazy, but what even like picking up the phone and calling someone, but maybe just exploring other areas or other ways to get a hold of people might be a good idea. Have you ever tried anything like that?
No, but I've talked about it before. So it is definitely a good idea. And I think, so I stick with email just because like that is the easiest medium for me. And then, basically that's it. It's the easiest medium for me. However, I know that like Facebook and probably Instagram would be really good channels where you could like direct message, like cut through the email noise, because there's probably not as many marketers, especially doing what you and I are trying to do, get backlinks, like make the connection between our niche sites or our authority sites with the brand. So I think that would be really interesting. And for someone to try, right, these ideas that we're talking about, like, are difficult enough, right? People are lazy enough that they're probably not going to try it. So I've talked to my friend Jim about like calling and reaching out, particularly to like smaller brands, right? So here's a little hack. I think Jim may have told me about this. I don't remember exactly the origin, but like to go to Amazon and find like fulfilled by Amazon providers or whatever and message them through the Amazon like messaging system or whatever to reach out. Or, I mean, if they have a website link, you could obviously go to their website. But like a lot of times, especially people doing FBA, they're spending all their time learning FBA stuff and ordering product and dealing with logistics, supply chain, all that mess that like drop shipping and FBA is. And if you connect with them, maybe by calling them, maybe going through this other channel, you could probably work with them to like get a link. I mean, they're just going to be happy that someone's trying to promote their product. So they'll probably bend over backwards. Again, particularly where, we're trying to do so much and learn so much about like, content and outreach and niche site stuff. They're trying to learn all that about drop shipping and FBA, and they don't have time to do the website blog content angle right now. So if you could fill that void for them, like you both win. Maybe their site isn't really, that authoritative. Maybe it doesn't have that many backlinks, but it's so relevant that like it's a really good link to have. Relevancy is really important. So if you could nail that link, that would be good. So a couple ideas for people. You could try and call folks on the phone, do what Nick said, and like, message people on Facebook or Instagram or something, or the Amazon messaging system, like the internal Amazon email that you can send messages to. Have you ever heard of that, Nick, or have you ever tried that?
I haven't, but that sounds like, the fact that I haven't heard about it probably makes it a good idea, because it's if I haven't heard about it, then I'm sure not too many other people have heard about it either.
Yeah.
But I can imagine that a drop shipping company, if they approached me and said like, hey, we have this, product or something, and we want, could you write content for us? Like, that's pretty cool, right? So if you approach them in that same way, I totally get what you're saying, because that drop shipping is a whole nother world.
Cool. Any other questions you got?
Not really. Those were the main ones that I wanted to riff off of with you. So that's
we're good. All right.
About it on my end. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything you want to? We could edit this little part out. Is there anything you want to promote or anything? Or you mentioned a podcast to me a while back, or are you looking for freelance gigs or anything? Or
no, I mean, if people want to contact me about KGR content, like I'll be happy to. If we're editing this part out, then I've been doing a thing with Keyword Shitter, it's called,
Yeah.
and it just spits out a ton and ton of keywords. You can do this with other things too, and then
Right.
you take that, you put that into the keywords everywhere bulk uploader, put that into an Excel spreadsheet, and then just like copy and paste. I think people were talking about that on the Five Figure Niche Site Facebook group, but
Oh, they
yeah.
were. Okay. Okay. And then,
Oh, also like Facebook groups is huge too. You can find I found some really good writers in some of the Facebook groups. There's a lot of junk like Upwork too, but yeah,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
some untapped
Interesting.
potential as well.
So, Nick, where can people follow you? Maybe if they want help with like little keyword stuff or just want to hear about like what you're working on, where should people follow you?
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter or Facebook is the easiest way. I go
Cool.
by my real name, so yeah,
Right
feel
on.
free to reach out.
Cool. We'll put links below so people can find you and stuff. Well, Nick, thanks a lot, and thanks for connecting with me like back in the day. It's been interesting, like seeing your progress. And what, we didn't even ask. So you have a couple niche sites. You've been working on them a little bit. How's traffic? How's revenue? If you could share any kind of stats or anything.
Yeah, sure. So the main one that I've been working on is started in June, and didn't get any click-throughs to Amazon, nothing like that. Last month, for the month of October, I'll just say it was about $18.
Nice.
So 12 products bought, like an unusual amount of cancels and returns for
Yeah.
whatever reason. So I don't know if that has to do with, and then somehow they said that a family member, they accounted a couple items to a family member, and so I didn't get
Gotcha.
credit for those either. So
All right. But you're getting a
yeah,
little traffic, getting a little traction leading up to here to the retail season. So that's cool.
yeah, exactly. And every month, I mean, at first it was like no clicks, no orders, and now I'm starting to see the little pops in the orders and pops
Nice.
in the clicks and stuff. So yeah, I can imagine that compounding this out to a couple more months, it should be at least $100 I would imagine by December time.
Yeah.
I'm
And
shooting for
like,
it anyways.
for people's reference, I mean, a lot of times like the first $100 takes like cumulatively it takes like, maybe 3-4 months. And then like maybe month 5 or 6, you may hit like $100. And depending on the timing, right? When you have like Black or like November and December, the retail months like coming up, like things kind of get out of whack. Like you'll get more sales than you normally would have. So the trajectory is great, Nick. It sounds like you're making good progress. So all right, cool. I just wanted to ask that before we ended up here. Well, thanks again, Nick. Thanks for your time. Have a great day. And yeah, we'll get an update from you like after the retail season.
Awesome, Doug. Thanks again for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right, I want to thank Nick again for joining me, telling his story of, being a digital nomad and what he's doing differently. And I encourage you to check out, Nick's projects that he's working on. He's launching a podcast, or depending on when you watch this, the podcast can be out already. I'll put links below, of course, and feel free to reach out to Nick with, questions or anything. I believe he wants to connect on Facebook in general, but yeah, just check out the links below and you'll be able to find Nick. So my name's Doug Cunnington from Niche Site Project. And if you enjoyed this video, I encourage you to check out a couple of the other videos. And if you like it, please consider subscribing. Thanks.